Thanks for letting me think about this more.
Yeah, no
I haven't had time to think about it like I've wanted to. This is helping me.
So, okay, so I thought that talk with Dave Smalley was really cool about God being good or bad, and the analogy between...
He pulled that on me, by the way. He had told me before, hey, here's what we're going to talk about. And then literally said, actually, at least he said it. I know I said we were going to talk about this, but instead I want to talk about this. Like,
when he's talking about, you brought up the surgery, and I thought that was a really good example of what you were trying to convey. And then he talked to the dentist, which was really a good example of what you were trying to say, and then kind of wrapped into the whole power thing. But I thought that the conversation kind of ended right before, or ended too soon.
I agree.
And so what I wanted to kind of discuss is when he was talking about your method of how you determine whether a God is good or bad. I guess let me start with, do you think that a God can be evil?
So that's really a separate question, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
So the answer has to be yes. Could the God of this universe be evil? Though I'm not sure that that's a yes. I'm not saying it's a no either. But as I've wrestled with it, so here's the main reason why I'm not confident that a God of this universe could be evil. Because if that God were evil, they would not be all powerful. So they could be a small g God, but they could not be a capital G God. Here's why. Evil requires good. Good does not require evil. So evil is the twisting of something good. So things that are fundamentally good, and they have to be twisted to be made evil. And so they aren't on equal platform footing. If you want to, for the sake of time, if you want to read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, this is one of his main tenets, and I'm not going to justice here, but that is one of his main tenets is that evil is dependent on good. So, pick whatever behavior it is, sex or even killing, or I'll pick the hardest ones that on that end of it. They're often connected to vices, and realizing it is not the pursuit of something that is wrong. It is the way it is pursued that is wrong. So if evil is dependent upon good and good is not dependent on evil, then in this universe, it's hard to see how an all-powerful God could be evil.
Okay. Is it your position that the only way this universe could come about would be if an all-powerful God did it, or is it possible?
In order to be God. I mean, in order to be the God, we're talking about the monotheistic, omnipotent, omnipresent, benevolent, whatever God. Then, benevolent, we're taking that one out for the sake of argument. But then, yes, you could have godlets, you could have Greek gods or whatever. I think there's so many logical fallibilities in when you start doing that kind of stuff. But yes, when you're talking about the Creator God, that absolute, that ontological, that thing above which there is no thing, which I think is a philosophical necessity. There has to be something above which there is nothing else. So what that means is, yes, you're stuck with an all-powerful God.
Okay, and if he is all-powerful, then he can't be evil?
So the problem with you have an all-powerful God creating a universe in which evil is dependent upon good, and he's evil, to me is nonsensical. I guess that just wouldn't make it. To me, that makes no sense. He would have to be evil. If he is evil, by the way, and characteristics of a God like that have to be static. So if you have a God like that, his baseline characteristics, his identity, his essence has to be static. And so that being the case, he would then create a universe in which goodness was the fail-safe and evil was the twisting of the fail-safe. That's
okay.
And I don't just mean in human condition, I mean period. So what you have are either things that are amoral or good, that in order to become evil, they have to be twisted. Yeah, something has to be done to them.
Okay.
Evil is honestly, okay, go ahead.
if it was shown to you that it's possible for something that just is before it's twisted could be evil, would that maybe change your position in the evil / all-powerful?
I don't know. I mean, it would certainly be a punch in the gut for it. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that would be a good argument against it.
Is there any way for us to determine whether something starts as being good or starts as being bad? Is there any way to know?
I was thinking about that too. I actually need to go back and reread my Lewis and see how he engages with that, because he spent a lot more time thinking about it than I have had since that conversation. So at this point, I'm going to have to kind of punt, because I need to go back and look to see what is the case made and what are the arguments made to back that view. It's kind of I'm at the age now where I remember being convinced by them. I don't remember what the stages were to convince me there. So I tend to go back and look at that in any case. But I would say, yes, if there was something that was demonstrably, essentially evil, at its essence, it is evil, then that would certainly, that would shut down that argument for God being necessarily benevolent.
Okay. When you were talking with David and we got into the subject of humanity being, what's the word you use? Basically, when we see something that's horrible, we lack the perspective, or we have the inability to see the big picture as God would.
Yeah. Perspective is that's the word. That's one of the answers to the problem of suffering is perspective.
Let's say there was someone here that believed that God exists, and it's the same God. Well, I guess not. Maybe they had a disagreement about the God, and they thought the God was evil.
Okay.
And then they explained to you that every time he sees something horrible and just outright bad and all that, whatever the example is, that validates that the God is evil. And every time he sees something that is good, he would see that as our inability as human beings to view the grand scheme evil plan.
The grand evil plan?
Yeah, so if there are
everything works together for evil?
Right.
Okay.
So if that person was there making this argument, and you're on the other side saying, hey, God is good, every time I see something good, I validate that, and every time I see something bad, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I felt like you were saying, I just trust that he has it all figured out. If they were kind of doing the opposite argument, and they just trust that he is just going to, have the worst in mind, would there be a way for us to figure out which one of you is more correct?
I think so. There's a couple. One that comes to mind is I think there would need to be an explanation for what the grand evil design is. So in the same way that in Christianity we would say the grand good design is what we would call redemption, to make all things good. In the end, to make things good, to redeem them, to put them where they're supposed to be. Would be an example of that. So, that's part of the overall plan. Now, that's a cosmic plan and an eternal plan, and there isn't a way to empirically test it. So far as we know, only a few people have claimed to go there and come back who actually have any level of confidence, and so, and there's only one of them that I trust, and so that's that's why I don't go there when I'm talking to someone like David. The discussion of heaven or the afterlife it's a doctrinal conversation. There's no despite the fact that the vast majority of humanity intuits that as well. That's including, laughably, he and I haven't talked about this, but his daughter, who apparently believed in a moon. The moon was God at one point, but that we intuit that we pick and choose. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So. The idea would be, one, I'd be interested to hear what the cosmic plan was and how that is served by all the good things. They would need to show that there's evidence of that all of the good things do add up to something bad.
Okay.
That would be an example. I would love to see that would be one piece. I think there's the evidence would be, gosh, I mean, we'll stick with that one.
Okay.
No.
So if like, let's say they gave their idea of what the grand scheme
Sure.
plan is, and they explained how, you know, the whole plan is to get everyone to hell, or whatever it is.
Right.
Would that decrease your confidence that God is good?
It's an interesting line of question. So if they were able to show that it makes more sense that God is evil, would it make me doubt that God is good? Well, yeah. I mean,
Not necessarily if it makes more sense, because
if they gave a rational argument,
if they're basically, you're saying that you would have to see the big picture and what it would ultimately be. So to make things good. So if he told you the whole plan is to make things bad,
right?
And then he sort of connected the dots in some way.
if that was doable, sure. I mean, of course, if someone was able to show, here's how joy and forgiveness and redemption and love and hope and all those things can be worked in such a way as to create an ultimate evil. Mm-hmm. And remember, remember, we're talking about the difference between evil and bad.
Yeah.
So evil is going to be, you've got an evil God that has to be malicious. Mm-hmm. So you have to have a God who understands that there is such a thing as good and is choosing otherwise, is choosing the other. So when a wolf bites another wolf, that's not evil, because there's no concept of morality. If there is no God, I also agree with the statement, if there is no God, there's no abstract, objective concept for morality. There's no objective concept of good and evil. That doesn't mean we can't be good or evil. Obviously, I believe because there is a God, we are good or evil. But the concept of good and evil is either essentially an imaginary delusional construct created by social interaction, or there is a higher expression of it. So with our higher expression, and that higher expression, this God knows that there's such a thing as good. So he knows sex is good, but rape is evil. And the reason he created sex was so that he could get rape. Like that would have to be, you'd have to make the argument that what he wanted was rape. Sadly, he has to live with the fact that 99% of sex is a positive thing, or is joyful, or is whatever, in order to get his 1% of rape, which is really what he's all about. That the vast majority of killing is either fighting against what we call evil, or is good and evil at conflict, or is just killing in order to provide sustenance or whatever. It's a bummer that he's stuck with all of these neutral or positive expressions of killing in order to get the handful of murders that really is what gives him the kicks. You would have to explain that, and if you're able to explain that in a way that all things work together for evil for those who whatever, yeah, of course that would be. I mean, that would be impressive. I mean,
that would cause you to doubt
whether God was good. I mean, I'd have to engage with that. Again, you're talking about it has to be more convincing than my argument. So, but if it's a good, convincing argument, absolutely, it would make me revisit that in a serious way. I won't believe it unless it's a better explanation for reality than the argument I'm making.
So what would be an example of a better explanation?
Again, if I knew that, I might believe it. If I knew there was a better explanation for something other than God, then I would believe it. Obviously, I don't think there is one, or I would. So, for example, a good, this is maybe this will help you, a good explanation that, or a plausible explanation that there is no God is the one I posited a minute ago about the evolution of the human brain. That we have evolved ourselves beyond rationality. We're no longer reasonable, now we are delusional. And we are deluding love, friendship, family, morality, God. We're deluding all those things. And that what we do has no more significance than any other evolved animal. And I'm not opposed to evolution, fan. But the idea is that is a good explanation. It is not as good as the one I believe in, or I would believe it.
Okay. So I want to get back. I want to kind of repeat what I think you're saying, just so you correct me. You're basically saying you see more good than bad, and
I see more defense of there being a good God than a bad God, than an evil God.
Okay.
And I do see more good than bad. So yes, that is also a true statement.
Okay.
That's not the whole argument. It's not a counting. It's not like
okay.
Black beans and white beans, and the white beans outnumber the black beans. Therefore,
okay.
No.
So you do recognize that there's more good than bad, but even if there was more bad than good, that would not be
sufficient evidence that God is evil.
Okay.
Because in case by case, so I'm talking large scale, there are people's lives who I would say, see, that would be really tough to say. I will at least accept theoretically that there would be people's lives who have been more defined by bad experiences than good experiences. Okay. Now again, you also have to deal with the fact that evil requires a morality. And so if someone's life was filled with being bitten by bed bugs, that's bad, but it's not evil. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And so it's bad, but the bed bugs aren't moral agents. There's animals. And we do live in a world, part of Christian doctrine is we live in a fallen world. We're not supposed, there's nothing about Christian doctrine that says we're supposed to be comfortable here. We may be some icing on the cake, but that's not a promise or a guarantee. I mean, tens of thousands of Christians every year suffer and die for their faith. Obviously, it is not a guarantee of Christian doctrine that everything's going to be good here. It is a foundation.
Do you think that the person that believes, God is all evil, and when they see bad, it validates that. When they see, good, it's just our inability to see it, the grand scheme of scale.
Sure,
and let's say that even just because things are good, it does not negate the possibility that the God is evil. It's just our inability to do that. If they're largely using the same method you are when it comes to evaluating whether God is evil or not, but they're coming up with a different conclusion based off of a bias that he is evil, do you think that's where you're starting?
No. So you're asking me to evaluate an argument that's not being made. I can't evaluate an argument that's not being made. I would be happy for someone to make it.
I'm not necessarily evaluating the argument. I'm evaluating the method that they use.
Yeah. So some of the questions that as we keep going down this, the questions that you're asking, and I get that this is Socratic, but the questions that you're asking remind me of, so when I was in martial arts, our instructor would do a demonstration, and people would say, what do you do if someone does this? And the instructor would say, they'd call them up and say, what do you do if somebody attacks you with a knife? And he would say, here's a plastic knife. How would you attack me? Here's how I would defend myself. Without fail, by the end it was, so if someone is behind you and they've got a gun in your back and they've already shot you, what do you do? Well, if that happens, I probably die. So some of the questions as we're going through this, it's if I give all of the benefit of the doubt to the other side of the argument, how would it affect me? Well, I mean, if they win the argument, it's going to have a huge effect on me. I'm not involved in Christianity because of cognitive dissonance. I'm involved in Christianity, in fact, sometimes despite that. I would say it is it's rational. Therefore, if someone using that methodology, using that methodology, they need to make their case. So it's not wrong for them to use that methodology. Absolutely. I hope they do use that methodology. I mean, I think that'd be a fantastic experiment for someone to do.
Yeah, I'm not so much interested in the arguments that one could make. I guess what I'm trying to understand is that if they can use the same methodology as you, but with a different prerequisite or a different starting point, right? I'm going to assume God is evil, and then I'm going to assume God is bad, and then they both use the same method, and they can reach different conclusions. What does that tell us about the method?
It depends on how good they do a job of it doesn't tell us anything about the method. So if if I drive to Dallas successfully and someone else drives to Dallas and crashes, what that tells you about is the driving skill. It has nothing to do with the method. It has nothing to do with driving. So there's nothing wrong with if I would encourage somebody to take that tact. So one, it's not a presupposition. By the time you reach the conclusion that there is a God, then yes, of course I'm starting with a presupposition there is a God. I did not start with the presupposition there is a God, but by the time I'm discussing the nature of God, I have to be assuming there is a God. So assuming there is a God is the evidence, the preponderance of the evidence that he is good or that he is evil, that the preponderance of the evidence that he is good, okay, good, I got that, that's which I believe is true.
Yeah.
Now, that being the case, how do you explain that there people do evil things and that the world is bad at times? That there are bad things in it. How do you explain suffering? Okay, having accepted, so having found that the preponderance of the evidence is that there is a God, that the preponderance of the evidence is that he is benevolent, now I need to come up with an explanation for evil. Then how is there evil? Where does it come from? So the answer to that is, for example, that evil is not a created thing. It is a responsive thing based in freedom. If you have such a thing as goodness and you have such a thing as freedom, by definition you have evil, or at least the potential for evil. Then if you have a creature capable of evil, now you have it. And that's the step. I mean, that's absolute. That's necessity. So given that there is evil, there is such a thing as good and evil. So if there is, then I need to be able to explain, then if there is such a thing as good and evil, and there is a God who is good, why would that God allow for evil? And part of the answer is going to be, I can give you examples of why he might allow for evil. I can't always answer that question because I lack the perspective that he has, like we talked about with the surgeon. So realize when you're just having that conversation, you're not starting with, is there a God or isn't there a God, and is he evil? It's, is there a God or isn't there a God? For me, the preponderance of the evidence is there is.
For me, I mean, for this kind of thought experiment, we just jump right to there is God.
Right.
And I guess...
So you're going to have to presuppose then with me, there is a God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the comparison between the two people is you both believe in
Right.
God. And as far as I can tell...
So the next stage is this God good?
Right. How do we determine
benevolence or not? And that's what we've been talking about.
So if the method is determining whether he's good or is bad is evaluating the goodness of the universe or the badness of the universe?
Evil.
Or the evilness of evilness of the universe, then...
So understand, you in having that conversation, you have accepted there is such a thing as a standard of good and evil. Now, we're not discussing whether or not if there was a God and if he said rape was good, it would be good. That's a totally different question.
Yeah.
So we're assuming that this God understands that rape is evil and sex is good. At its essence, sex is good, though the abuse of sex is evil. He understands that, or it understands that, and it prefers evil. It chooses evil. It creates evil. That's the argument you've got to make, and I think there's a lot of weakness there. Whereas I think I can say, this God, when he created things at the essence level, and they are all good.
So then it kind of seems like that the way we evaluate whether he's good and bad or evil, you messed that up, is seeing if there's more.
Not just more. Is it defined? Which one is dominant? So which one is dominant, good or evil? Which one is the natural experience, good or evil? Those would certainly be the case. Which one do we fight for, good or evil? So even bad guys, one of the funny things, I think another argument for this is that his creation, the only moral part of his creation that we know of, believes in good. We fight for good. We may be wrong about what is good or evil, but none of us fight for evil. That's so phenomenally rare, it's diagnosable as a brain disorder. So the reason that you have the super friends and you have the League of Evil Doom, well, the reason that doesn't really happen, the reason that Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin or whatever, they don't call themselves the League of Evil Doom is because they think they're doing the right thing, apparently. I mean, you read Mein Kampf and Hitler thought he was doing the right thing. Now, or they justify it. The Jim Joneses, they do evil, but they think that's okay for them because they're narcissistic. They think they're the highest God in the universe, and so they can be allowed to do whatever they want to do, and they have that attitude. So his creation, God's creation, we as created beings, we defend ourselves from the perspective of goodness. If I push you over and you say, "Why'd you push me over?" I don't go, "Because you're an insignificant bug." What I say is, "I didn't see you there," or "Oops, I thought you'd think that was funny." I explain it, I justify it in terms of, I'm not being evil, I promise.
Yeah.
So that's an odd thing for this evil God to hardwire into his creation, is because again, when there is a God and he understands good and evil, and he has hardwired the defense of good into his creation. That's a pretty weird decision. He has hardwired goodness at the essence level into creation. That's an odd decision to make. Most humans experience positive, neutral to positive, the vast majority of the time. That's an odd decision for an evil God to make. So, might there be a way to explain those away in a way that argues that there is a God who is fundamentally evil, who is equally evil as the God who I serve as benevolent? I don't know if there is. I can't fathom it. I'd love to hear it though, and not only am I'm not rejecting that method. I don't think it's. Yeah. Of course, there's going to be methods that can be used either direction.
Okay. Last question. I'm done. I apologize.
Thanks for letting me think about this more.
Yeah. No
I haven't had time to think about it like I've wanted to. This is helping me.
So, do you?
You got to send me a copy of this so I can take notes on it.
Okay. Cool.
My brain works weirdly. And I do need to bail soon.
If you both are in the position of not seeing the grand scheme of things,
right,
and having that inability, does that affect how confident you or that other person could be?
Absolutely. So I'm assuming if I was God, I wouldn't only be 75% sure of things. If I had God's perspective, I doubt if God only gets to 75% sureness. And I am confident that, so even if I was one of those people who thought I got to 100% confidence, the truth is I only get to 98% confidence. It is just not possible for a human being to legitimately be 100% sure of anything. Again, we could be strapped down to a bed pumped full of drugs right now. So I have to acknowledge, I have to always leave room for the fact that I am a flawed creature with a brain that breaks on some people. And so we can never be 100% sure of anything. We can only go with the preponderance of the evidence, and that's the case. Now, everything we do, we take some things on, quote, faith, meaning trust that we cannot be certain of, 100% certain of. And I don't even mean that as the correct definition. So literally, faith just means trust. But the colloquial usage is faith means trust that I'm not 100% sure of, which we're not 100% sure of anything. But faith just means to trust. I had faith in this chair when I set my rear end in it, because I set my rear end in it as proof that is that faith. So, can we know anything for certain? No. Can there be more evidence for something? Yes. Can there be evidence that proves that we're wrong? Absolutely. About any of it. And so, I think it is unfortunate that too often in these debates, and especially when it's on my side of the debate, it is unfortunate to me that there are a lot of people on my side of the debate who they just don't understand some of the things they're talking about. And so they make these confident statements of 100% confidence. Only if there is a God and he is all-knowing, then he gets to be 100% confident.
Right.
No one. The fact that such a thing could theoretically exist as 100% confidence is probably a case for the existence of God, probably a rational case for the existence of God. The fact that we can, because we really can't imagine things that don't exist. We can imagine them coming together in ways they don't exist. So maybe that's all that is. I have to think about it. I'm not making a claim, but it certainly would, I think, the fact that we can imagine 100% certainty. We can't imagine a circle all the way colored in. Then humanity is only capable of something less than 100%. So yes, if I saw things the way God was able to, if I had his perspective, my assumption is I would not have any doubts. I would not have any questions. I would not have any lack of confidence.
I really appreciate that position of, well, we can't really be sure of anything, because a lot of times, when I have these conversations with people, the confidence is always 100%, yeah. and that's what kind of like sparked my interest. And then I heard you from Tyler, Texas, and I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to this guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was really. I'm glad I came. I thought it was a really good talk.
I want to make sure you know. I actually don't know for certain, although I'm assuming from some of the things that it seemed like people who knew you best commenting on your things that at best, sorry, I don't mean that to be judgmental. At most, you would probably be agnostic and potentially atheist based on the comments. I could be completely wrong about that.
I am not 100% sure of anything.
There you go.
So that helps.
And you don't have to be.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's not necessary. Again, am I 100% sure my car's not going to explode when I turn the crank the engine? No, I can't be. But I'll bet I'll walk out there and turn the key here in a minute. I mean, it's silly to think that that the creatures that we are. I mean, we live in such a restricted. I only have one way to live, and that is 1 second per second moving forward. That's such a limited existence already. I mean, it means every single thing in the future I am not 100% certain of. I can have huge confidence, like that if I drop a pin, I have huge confidence it's going to fall. I rely on that. I rely on the fact that this chair is not going to fall out from under me, although in my lifetime once or twice I have had chairs break. Yeah. And so to say we're 100% certain, certainty, you might enjoy, Dr. William Lane Craig talks about this periodically when he gets asked, like what would cause him to doubt the existence of God. And doubt, confidence, surety, these are all psychological states. And so they have no bearing on whether something is true. I mean, I used to work at a camp where we put people off zip lines, and they would sit up there and cry, and I can't do this, and it's a 40-foot zip line. It's a long way down to the ground, and they're about to just slide off the end. At that moment, strapped into that zip line, they are more safe than they have been since they left their mother's womb. No one gets hurt once they're strapped in. It's almost not possible to hurt yourself once you're strapped in. No one gets hurt. They walked up the hill, no problem. They drove from Dallas, no problem. Their life was at risk in both of those situations.
Public traffic was even worse.
Driving from Dallas, you got a real shot of not making it. I mean, it's still tiny, but you're not going to get hurt once you're strapped in. But boy, because the psychological state of confidence is super low for them. What is the reality? The reality is they're not going to get hurt once they slide off that thing.
Yeah, I guess for me, the beginning is just an understanding that you can't be 100% certain of anything, and then from there it's like, okay, so what are the methods I can use to more reliably come to know something? Right. Not 100% certain, but to relatively know, to whatever that percentage is you call know. What are the methods I can use to reach that? What are the unreliable methods? What are the reliable methods? And so for me, I like to examine those methods. And one of the big ones is being able to falsify the claim or the belief. And if I'm not able to falsify something, that means I'm not able to identify when I'm wrong. And if I have a belief where I can't identify when I'm wrong, if there's something I could do, then I tend to have less confidence in it.
So let me point something out to you. You made a positive statement. You said, if I cannot falsify it, then I should have, I think your exact words was less confidence in it, or I shouldn't.
I wouldn't have less confidence. Or I wouldn't have as much confidence in it.
How do you falsify that statement?
How do I falsify
the statement? If I can't falsify it, I should have less confidence in it. How do you falsify that statement?
I don't know if that's necessarily a claim.
It is. You better believe. If I can't falsify it, I shouldn't believe it. I mean, just not what your words you used. You used different words.
I said I wouldn't because my experience is that it's usually it's not a reliable.
Is it safe to say that shouldn't? If I can't falsify it, I shouldn't put more faith in it, or I shouldn't believe it, or I shouldn't. So whatever statement you're making there, whatever statement you made there, is a statement. You're claiming an epistemology in that statement. But it's a statement you can't defend based on your own epistemology. You're needing something from the outside to show that statement is trustworthy. It's like saying the only source of knowledge is empirical evidence, which many
I see what
naturalists
you're
say.
saying. Like that, the sentence alone doesn't hold any weight unless I relate it to.
So let's say
tests I've made.
Yes. So let's say you said it in the more concise. This is not the way you said it, so I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Yeah.
But let's say you said it simply. If I can't falsify it, I don't believe it. Okay. So then you've got to be able to falsify the statement. If I can't falsify it, I don't believe it. Like I have to be able. No, I shouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
It's not trustworthy. Let's say it that way. If I can't falsify it, it's not trustworthy. Well, then you would need to be able to falsify the statement. If it isn't trustworthy, if it isn't falsifiable, it isn't trustworthy. You would need a way to falsify that, or it's a self-contradictory statement. It's like saying there's no source of knowledge except empirical evidence. Okay, prove it to me empirically.
It seems like when we form sentences to seem more absolute, that's where we come into trouble, because if I say if this happens, then I will not do that, and then basically what you said was making those statements more absolute.
No. Okay, so let's not make it absolute. Let's say if it's not falsifiable, I shouldn't believe it.
Okay.
If it's not falsifiable, it is less trustworthy. If it's not falsifiable, it is not dependable. However you state it.
Okay.
You then, based on that sentence, you need a way to falsify that statement, or it's not a trustworthy statement, or not as trustworthy a statement.
Mm.
So you're using something other than falsifiability to reach the conclusion that falsifiability is important. So that's rationality in action. So you would say, if I say empirical evidence is the only source of knowledge, I have to then be able to prove that empirically, or it's a self-contradictory statement. And you can't prove empirically that empiricism is valuable. You can prove it rationally, which is why I believe that empiricism is valuable, because rationality supports that it is. I believe, rationally speaking, falsifiability is a valuable commodity when it comes to evidence. It is not, I don't know that I would put it in the top 10. Self-contradiction, I think, would be a more trustworthy source of truth. Something that self-contradicts cannot be true. So now you've got something to think about too.
Yeah, that seems to be more along the lines of a philosophical argument, which I think my brother is pretty good at. But me, I'm just like,
Seems self-evident, which is intuition.